Our final briefing is on the Climate Change Relief for Urban Areas Act. And Caroline, if you're ready, come forward.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Caroline Benedetti, and I'm honored to be presenting the final briefing on the Climate Change Relief for Urban Areas Act of 2023 on behalf of Professor Luis Rosen's workshop team. Before we begin, I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start with the environmental problem through the lens of a case study. Then we're going to move on to the bill itself as well as what it mandates. We're going to go through the first year timeline and how much everything's going to cost. And then we're going to finish off with a program vision as well as a little bit of time for some questions. Hunting Park, Philadelphia is an environmental justice area. In 2020, 97% of Hunting Park residents were Black, Indigenous people of color, and around 2/3 of residents were considered low income. Hunting Park has a history of being redlined and is also located very close to two industrial areas, meaning that built area, things like concrete, pavement, and buildings make up around 75% of land use, which is much higher than the Philadelphia-wide average. This excess built area means that there's less green area, which leads to hotter temperatures. In the summer of 2020, temperatures reached over 22 degrees Fahrenheit than other parts of Philadelphia, and you can see in this graphic on the screen that Hunting Park is significantly hotter than the surrounding areas of Philly. This problem is not unique to Hunting Park, Philadelphia, although in Hunting Park specifically, in the summer of 2024, in August, one teacher reported that classrooms reached over 80 degrees Fahrenheit. This is really significant because the ideal temperature for effective learning is between 68 and 74 degrees Fahrenheit. And for each additional degree in temperature that a student experiences during a school year, it reduces learning by around 1%. As you can see, several other urban areas also were forced to close schools this August over a 3-day period. In April and May of the same year, over 200 million students were forced to go home due to extreme heat. And while not every student or school is in an environmental justice community that I have on the screen, Black, Indigenous people of color are more likely to attend schools that lack adequate infrastructure to be able to deal with heat. In fact, around 3 to 7% of the racial gap in PSAT scores, which is a common test that juniors take in America, can be explained by hot school days. Urban areas are already significantly hotter than their surroundings, around 1 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit, and by the end of the year, we can expect temperatures to increase by another 3 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Today, 36,000 schools do not have the adequate AC systems to be able to cope with this extreme heat. And this has very real health implications beyond just learning. By the end of the century, the National Institute of Health predicts there will be around 50,000 to 110,000 heat-related deaths annually. This is where our bill comes in. The Climate Change Relief for Urban Areas Act of 2023 is a partisan bill introduced by Democrat Adam Schiff. It has the primary goal of reducing surface temperatures through green infrastructure, and there are two primary sections. The first is urban greening, which amends a pre-existing act to prioritize certain areas for urban forestry resources and funding. And the other section creates a pilot rooftop garden grant program targeted to primary and secondary schools. And when schools receive these grants, they must incorporate some component of the garden into their curriculum. You'll notice that both of these sections require something called an equity score to prioritize funding. But what exactly is an equity score? Garden and tree equity scores essentially combine a variety of data points into a single measure. A few examples of data points are on the screen, including racial composition, number of urban gardens in an area, as well as average temperature. And what these scores are meant to do is help policymakers target the environmental justice communities that have the highest need for resources like increased tree canopy or school rooftop gardens. Now, for the purposes of our simulation, we have chose to focus on only Section 3 of the bill, And this is for a few main reasons. The first is that because it does not amend a pre-existing act, it's a new initiative to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, meaning it's going to require significant planning. It also impacts children, which is one of the populations more vulnerable to heat. And because of that educational component I mentioned, it fosters future environmental stewardship. The USDA already has efforts surrounding the objectives of the bill, and I want to point out primarily the Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production, or OUAIP. OUAIP has issued grants in the past for urban agriculture, but they've never issued grants specifically for rooftop gardens or specifically schools, and they've never used a garden equity score before. So this is going to require a bit of new infrastructure to be able to facilitate this grant program. And we have decided to title our program Sprout, or Schools Promoting Rooftop Opportunities for Urban Transformation. Like I said, this would fall under OUAIP, and within the first year, we have two primary goals. The first is develop and launching our garden equity score, and then the second is develop and launching our request for proposal. American Forest, which developed a similar tool to Garden Equity Score, took around a year to develop theirs, so we expect ours to take the same. And then after talking to individuals at the USDA, the request for proposal process should take around months, so we expect ours to take the same. And in the first year, we do not plan on awarding any grants because we want to build a robust program infrastructure that will be able to target the communities, the environmental justice communities that we are trying to target. So now that I've gone over the two main goals, I'm going to break them down into important tasks of each subsection as well as who is responsible. You'll notice on the bottom that we have three different types of employees. The first is existing permanent employees from OUAIP. The second is new permanent employees that we would hire and they would continue on past year one. And then the third is new consultants that would be hired for 1 year for the purpose of accelerating the development of our program. So on day one, the program manager is going to establish goals for the program as well as establishing a development plan for the garden equity score. And then close to the same time, the remainder of our team is going to work on acquiring source data, things like number of urban gardens or surface temperature, and implementing that into a single score that will be unique to each census tract across the United States. At the same time, our developers will be working on building and launching the Garden Equity Score website, which will host the Garden Equity Score. You'll notice that the lead developer and full stack developer are new permanent employees. And this is because we want to ensure the maintenance of our website beyond year one. You'll also notice that we have a publications assistant on this task, and this individual is responsible for building out resources on the methodology of the Garden Equity Score alongside what a Garden Equity Score actually is. Importantly, we'll also have a public comment time period where communities that we're trying to reach are actually able to comment on the equity score and let us know their feedback so that we can implement it into the Garden Equity Score. The request for proposal will start in Q2, and our team will be primarily focused on making sure this request for proposal meets the mandates of the bill, so there will be a series of legal checks going on during this time period. We will also be focused on building out website resources, posting things like reports and hosting webinars to ensure that the communities we're trying to reach are both aware of the bill and aware of the process required to apply. And this is all with the end goal of creating and launching the application portal by the end of the year alongside our Garden Equity Score website. So now that I've given you a brief overview of what everything is going to cost, or what everything is going to be, I'm going to give you an estimate of what everything is going to cost. The bill appropriates a maximum of $30 million per fiscal year over a course of 5 years, but in our first year, we are going to spend significantly less than that because we are not awarding grants. We're going to hire a few permanent personnel that will be maintained throughout the lifetime of the program, and this will cost around $200,000. We will also hire some contractors, as I mentioned. The cost for this will be around $300,000, and this is primarily to accelerate the Garden Equity Score development. And then for operations, we will spend around $900,000. And this will be for things like software, like ArcGIS, as well as computers. In total, we expect to spend around $1.5 million in the first year. Now that I've given you an overview of how much everything is going to cost and what the first year is going to look like, I want to show you guys what a potential grant could do. So on the screen, I have a picture of New York Public School 41 in Greenwich Village, and this is before a rooftop garden. And through the efforts of a mother of a kindergarten teacher, as well as funds from the New York City Council, they were able to develop this extensive rooftop garden that significantly decreased energy use. Alongside a few other minor renovations, they were able to change their energy rating from a C to an A. The rooftop garden also buffered a significant amount of stormwater, over 150 gallons within the first year. And the school also implemented a new K through 12 curriculum covering several subjects. So students weren't just engaging with the rooftop garden during science class, they were doing art projects up there and many other things. Greenwich Village is not an environmental justice community, but as I close this presentation, I want to leave you with one main question. Why shouldn't students in environmental justice communities have access to the same resources as those who are not? I want to give a special thank you to my team, especially my managers, Kine and David, as well as Professor Rosen for her sage advice. Thank you. I will now take any questions.
Question? There's one.
Thanks, Caroline. That was great. I had two, and I'm just trying to pick which one I want to ask. Okay, your case study at the end there, I'm curious how much that actually cost, if you know, and like what the time frame for actually doing all the work was. I'm just trying to think in my head of like, if you have X budget, $30 million, whatever it is of life, like how many of those types of projects are actually feasible is kind of where I'm getting at.
Yeah, so I can kind of answer that like in general, not specific to this, in the sense that because the USDA has never issued like rooftop garden grants specifically, it's kind of hard to tell, like even if that full 30 million was able to be allocated for grants, how many we would actually be able to have, because there are so many different ways that the costs of a rooftop garden can vary. Like for example, if you just have raised beds, then that's much cheaper than like actually integrating the garden into the school. So it's a little bit hard to tell. This specifically, I don't have the exact number of how much it costs, but I can get back to you on that. And the project took around 5 years, but that included both garden infrastructure initially, like on the ground. Like the mother of the kindergarten student that initiated this project started with a garden on the ground and then like moved later on. So this rooftop was opened in 2012, but her efforts started in 2008. So I'm not exactly sure when the rooftop garden itself was started.
There's a question back there.
Thank you, Caroline. So similar direction for this case study. I imagine that you kind of have a trade-off between having plants on roofs that are kind of appropriate for roofs, like grass, but then grass is probably quite like dries out easily, and maybe it might have a bigger effect if you have other kinds of plants on a roof. And I'm wondering whether the bill at all addresses what kind of plants you put on roofs, for instance, and how to design the roof specifically.
Yeah, so there are some requirements that the bill has for grantees. One is that it must include 20% native plants and must be like organic farming, but not specifically like grass versus other types of plants. It's just up to the discretion of the grantee.
Okay. Final question over here.
Thank you for an amazing briefing. You mentioned the American Forests organization did a similar kind of program planning or assessment. Was that for tree equity by any chance?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I think we may have read the same report, so that's just cool.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll take one last question over here. I saw that hand. This will be the final question.
Hi, Caroline. Great presentation. My question is, has this program thought about how can they get some retribution from these gardens? You talk about like how you could engage the students in the garden, but like have you thought of, or like the program has thought of how to get some retribution, like for example from agriculture, or like planting some crops? Or
You mean like get
anything?
money back? So unfortunately, with a roof, well, there's kind of two components. With agriculture, a rooftop garden cannot really produce enough agriculture often to like fund that. I will say that oftentimes on like school roofs and community gardens, the benefits of that agriculture will go into like the community and like students will take it home and things like that. But also a rooftop garden itself over its lifetime is significantly cheaper than an actual like just plain roof because it does things like buffers the stormwater and prevents the fluctuations of the roof membrane with temperature, which makes the roof last longer. So it is cheaper in the long run. So if you think of that as like getting money back, that's one way.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so first I want to congratulate the groups and their faculty advisors for 5 excellent briefings. And I want to sort of bring you back again to the beginning of the summer workshop, and I want you to think about the journey that you've been on. First, how much more you know about every aspect of the problem and the proposed solution to these issues, having studied them. This is what's called learning by doing or experiential learning. You pretend that you're in the midst of putting this program into place. You start thinking about yourself like you're in the agency doing the work. And it results in, I think, an extremely high level of in-depth learning about the program. And that's one element of this sort of the pedagogic objectives of this course is for you to have that experience. But, and you know, go then also from the idea to the nitty-gritty details of what's going to actually happen, how much is it going to cost, and how are we going to know if it succeeds. And I've said this to you a number of times over the last 2 semesters. This is a very unique exercise. Most public policy schools don't integrate policy and management. They're separate topics, and sometimes the policy courses, you often taught by economists are largely about solutions that are never going to take place. And the management courses often don't speak the language that the policy analysts can think about, so that's a problem. But what we do here is we actually integrate science, public policy, politics, the real politics that you had to look at to ask yourself the question, what would it take to get this bill passed? And finally, the operational details of management. And so you learned how to go from an idea to reality, which is a very important set of intellectual tasks that people in management and in leadership positions need to go through. You also, I mean, all 5 of these briefings were better this week than they were last week. You went through a dry run process. Some improved remarkably, some improved incrementally, but all improved. And so part of what happened here is you went through a process of first developing your ideas and focusing them, deciding what's important, what's going to fit into a 10-minute briefing. And one of the reasons we put you through that process is, first of all, sometimes you don't get more than 10 minutes. And even more importantly, nobody's ever said, boy, that was too short a speech, okay? The opposite has often happened. And so the discipline is learning how to decide what's important and what's not important. And you did dry runs that were formal. I know that you did lots of practice sessions on your own and to each other, probably before mirrors and your beleaguered roommates, as you learn to focus this. And I want you to, if you want to understand how important this is, we go through this process over and over again during these 2 semesters. If you want to see how much better you are at this than other people at SEPA, go to their capstone final briefings, and you will see something that will startle you. They are long and disjointed, and not nearly as good as the 5 that we just heard. Because we really focus on this communication process because it's central to policy analysis and management. If you can't convey to decision makers what you've learned, nothing will change, nothing will happen. So you are educated to be change agents. This is a very deliberate process. We're not doing this just, because we want to torture you. We do it because we think it's really important for you to become professionals and to advance professionally. So you've now accomplished that. Now let me give you a little coming attraction. I guess you're going to hear soon from Maya on what your top 10 were from your survey. And then the faculty for next semester will go about finding projects. That exercise is underway. Next semester, it's very different than these 2 semesters. You have to design your own outputs. There's no weekly design. Oh, now you're doing this, now you're doing that. But you still got to get from whatever the clients asked for to whatever we produce in the end. And you have to understand what the client wants. So the client's not a simulated client like a faculty advisor. And you've had lots of choice in deciding what you want to do. That's not the way it's going to work next semester. Now you're going to be doing work for a client, for somebody who's going to tell you what the parameters of the project are. So when you decide it's going to have this much money or this much emphasis on something or other, that's not the way it works next semester. They tell you, and you have to figure out a way to deliver that in a capable way. So you now have lots of experience in most of the key skills that you're going to need next semester in workshop. It remains the integrative element of this program where you take all the things you're learning in the classroom and from these past 2 semesters in workshop and now apply it to problem solving. So you're well prepared for it. I have to say these were great presentations. I think you all did a wonderful job, and celebrate your completion. Good job, everybody.